So which of the two experiences would you have wanted to have? The experience that Isaiah had in our Old Testament reading where he was in the presence of God, or the experience that Peter had by the lake of Gennesaret with a net full of fish? Isaiah's experience was out of the ordinary, wasn't it? It was kind of like almost science fiction, Star Wars stuff. There he is in the presence of a supernatural power sitting on a throne. Angels are flying around. Smoke is filling the air. And when he speaks, the voice just shudders and shakes the whole temple. Wow, what an experience. Peter's experience was very much in the ordinary. Peter was at a familiar place for a fisherman, a lake. He was in a boat. And here's Jesus from landlocked Nazareth, a carpenter, gives him some very bad fishing advice. Go put out your net in the middle of the day in the deep water. Peter's nets are so full that they begin to break. You can imagine Peter saying, wow, I'll take this guy fishing with me anytime. Which experience would you have rather had? Isaiah's? Or Peter's? Or would you maybe have wanted neither experience? Because both Simon and Isaiah were struck with fear, weren't they? They were terrified because they were now in the presence of a holy God. Peter saw the power of Jesus that filled those nets with fish, and he saw that that same power could crush and punish him, an unholy sinner. Isaiah, he's in the presence of God, and all he could say, woe is me, I'm doomed, because he saw that same holiness of God and his unworthiness as a sinful human being. When's the last time you felt just like Peter or Isaiah, a trembling human being in the presence of a holy God, unworthy because of your sinfulness, feeling I shouldn't be in God's presence, that I'm doomed? You know, sin is really a simple three-letter word, isn't it? It's a simple three-letter word, but its effects are as devastating as a nuclear bomb. They damage everything around them. Sin leaves the vulnerable abused and sometimes even murdered. Sin leaves the disadvantaged taken advantage of. Your sin and my sin tears at the trust of our loved ones. Your sin and my sin leaves the ones that we love with feelings of inadequacy and unworthiness. Sin that we commit often tells people that things are more important than they are. Sin leaves emotional and sometimes even physical scars. The damage that sin, a three-letter word, creates is great. But even greater than the damage our sin causes to others is the damage that sin causes the one who is sinning. Think about it. When we sin, we go through a wide range of emotions. The first one's pleasurable. We wouldn't do the sin if it wasn't fun, right? But then soon that fun feeling changes and is gone, and in its place are feelings that are much less pleasurable, right? The shame of our sin smothers us like a wet blanket, removing any spiritual joy we have, leaving us feeling unworthy and dirty. The guilt of our sin grips us with negative thoughts that rob us of joy and the peace that we have. Sin leaves us feeling sometimes with feelings of despair, depressed, dark, and negative thoughts grip us. We feel unworthy before God, unworthy before others. So what does God do with trembling sinners like you and me who feel the unworthiness of our sin? Well, consider what he did with Isaiah. He didn't destroy Isaiah as he stood in the presence of God. Remember what he did? He commanded a messenger to take a burning coal from the altar of sacrifice, a picture of the sacrifice that Jesus would make in hell for our sins. And he has that messenger touch Isaiah's lips, not to burn him, but to cleanse him and purify him of his sin, so he's worthy in God's sight. What does God do for you and me, trembling sinners who feel the unworthiness of our sin? He says what he said to Peter, have no fear. Don't ever be afraid again about and over your sin. Why? Why could Peter believe those words that Jesus spoke to him? You ever wonder that? He could believe that was true, that he never had a fear over punishment of his sin again because he saw the power of Jesus. He saw that net. He saw those fish that had no reason to leave those deep, safe spots in the middle of the day and swim right into that net. He saw that miracle. He saw the power of Jesus. So when Jesus promised him forgiveness and peace, he believed that Jesus had the power to do that. Let me give you an example. Let's say you committed a crime, murder. You were guilty. You did it. You're on the run. Not a good thing because we have a policeman here in our attendance, but he won't. This is just a make-up thing. Let's say you committed murder. You're on the run. Can you imagine what your life would be like? You'd be constantly looking over your shoulder, is someone after me? Every time you heard a siren, you'd be worried about, is that the police after me? Your life would not be fun at all, right? But let's say now the police arrested someone else for your crime of murder. And he was put on trial, and the judge and jury found him guilty and sentenced him to life in prison, and the judge closed the books on that crime. Now you would be feeling a little differently, wouldn't you? You wouldn't be going around life looking over your shoulder, wondering if you're going to be caught. You wouldn't be startled at every siren you heard. Isn't that just what Jesus did for us? Jesus was charged with our crime of sin, with your crime of sin. Then God judged him as guilty and punished him with a sentence of hell in your place for your sin, and God closed the book up. So now Jesus says to you and me, have no fear. And we can believe him. God had the power to do that, to take your and my punishment of sin and give it to Jesus and close up the book. Do you see what Jesus does for you and me? He turns trembling sinners into now committed servants. And that's what Peter and James and John were, right? We're told that after, Jesus said to him, from now on you'll be catching people. With those words, God was calling Peter, James, and John to be his committed servants. But what does it mean to be catching people? Maybe if we understand fishing at Peter's time a little better, we can get what it means. Peter wasn't sitting in a boat with a rod and reel casting lures. He got in a boat with a big, long net. It had floats on top and weights in the bottom. And they stretched that net out along the shoreline. One boat was here. His associates, James and John, were there. Then one of the boats began a big circle. And they circled that net like that and closed it off completely. Then they drew the net in with all the fish trapped in there. Fishing at Peter's time was a group effort, a big business. You needed some associates. Then the fish had to be cleaned. Someone had to sell them at the market. Someone had to repair the boats and the nets before you could fish again. Catching fish was a group effort. catching people for Jesus is a group effort too. The last weeks in our readings from 1 Corinthians, God has pictured the congregation as a body, but it's got many parts. That's what we are. We're a congregation and has many parts that are needed to do the catching of people for Jesus. Catching someone who doesn't know Jesus, or the keeping of the people who know Jesus, like you and me, in the net. So you have pastors, you have teachers, you have ushers, you have acolytes, you have people who take care of the banners and the flowers and altar care. You have people who take care of the property here, people who teach Sunday school, people who play the piano, who sing, who play musical instruments, and the list goes on and on and on. One body, many members, all involved in trying to catch people. They're all needed. They're all different. But guess what? Do you know what's going to really catch people? Even more than a congregation doing all these things? What really catches people for Jesus is when people see your committedness to Christ. Now, I know that's not a word, but it works, committedness. When people see how committed we are to Jesus, that's what attracts people to Christ. What impression do you think it leaves on somebody when they see you leave every Sunday to go to church? What impression do you think it leaves on somebody when you say, I'm going to save my sexual self for marriage for Jesus? What impression do you think it leaves on somebody when they see you live out your faith in selfless love and service to that person? We have so many opportunities to give the reason for the hope we have. When someone we know has lost a loved one, or they're going through a difficult time in life, or a health problem, we give them the encouragement and hope we have. But those words carry a lot more weight, don't they, when people see how committed we are to Christ? And we can invite someone to come to worship with us or a Bible information class so they can come and see Jesus for themselves. But those invitations carry a lot more meaning when people see how genuinely committed we are to Christ. Think about it this way. If Tiger Woods would hold a marriage seminar, would you attend it? Probably not. But if this committed Christian couple who's had problems in their marriage but got through them and after 35 years were still committed and loving each other, if they held a marriage seminar, you might consider attending it, right? You see, fishing for people is a group effort, and we're all different. Some of you might have the ability to talk to people about Jesus. Some of you may not. That's okay. All the different gifts are needed. But what really catches people for Christ is when they see your own commitment to Christ. And you know the neatest thing about fishing for Jesus, catching people for Jesus? When I take my boys fishing, we have a rule. You catch them, you got to clean them. When we fish for Jesus, we don't have to clean them. He does. We just catch them. Jesus cleans them with His blood. He washes away their sins. We don't have to worry about the results when we fish for Jesus. We just live our lives and share our faith. But you know, living a committed life to Jesus, it's not easy, is it? It's much easier to just live the way of the world, because living a committed life to Jesus means I'm going to have to deny myself, and I'm going to have to think of others and how I can serve them. Living a committed life to Jesus means that I might get made fun of by other people for what I think and what I believe. It's not easy. But before you give up on living a genuine, committed life to Jesus, just think of one last thought. How committed Jesus was to you and me. When God His Father asked Jesus to leave everything in heaven, Jesus did. And He came down to this earth to be charged with your and my crimes of sin in our place, to be convicted, to be punished, and sent away so God could close the book. And the result? You and I get to go around living our life now, never looking over our shoulder whether God's going to punish us for our sin. We never have to worry that the siren of his anger is going to come off. But we now can go through life having no fear, knowing that the hot coal of God's holiness has purified us from all sin. That's how committed Jesus was to you and me. And that's commitment, isn't it? Amen.